They dragged her across the marble terrace, heels scraping against the stone linen dress, fluttering like a forgotten curtain in the wind. Laughter echoed from champagne-flushed mouths as camera phones tilted to capture the scene, a woman too plain for this place, too quiet for this chaos. "She's crashing the wedding," someone sneered, probably hoping to bag a billionaire. Emma Carter said nothing. She didn't scream, didn't explain. She just looked back once, not at them, but at the golden light spilling over the lake behind them like it held a secret only she understood. They didn't know. They didn't see the quiet strength in her eyes or the invitation still crumpled in her hand. Because the woman they were throwing out. She wasn't here to watch the wedding. She was the bride. Emma arrived alone. The soft hum of the taxi engine fading behind her as she stepped onto the sun-warmed cobblestone. Her dress, a simple cream linen, swayed gently with each step, catching the light like a whisper. No jewels, no designer label. Just worn leather flats and a single silver pendant resting near her collarbone. Her mother's long gone, but never far. The villa loomed ahead, regal and untouched by time. Ivy curled around archways and white roses spilled from stone urns like frozen fireworks. Emma paused at the entrance, her eyes lingering on an empty chair tucked beside the floral arch. A seat meant for someone who would never sit again. Her fingers brushed the pendant, and her breath caught not from sorrow but from memory, soft, steady, bittersweet. She smiled faintly. Then she stepped forward, holding her invitation like a quiet truth. At the entrance, a man in a sharply pressed black suit blocked her path. His arms were crossed, sunglasses reflecting the glint of the lake behind her. He didn't smile. "This way's for VIPs," he said, voice clipped dismissive. "Staff enters through the back." Emma's steps didn't falter. She met his gaze calmly, her voice even. "I'm a guest." The man's eyebrow lifted, amused or annoyed, it was hard to tell. She offered the invitation, her fingers steady despite the weight in the air. Emma Carter. He took it without a word, flipping it once, then again as if searching for a reason to laugh. Behind her, voices rose, guests arriving in gleaming black cars, laughter like polished glass heels clicking against stone. From the corner of her eye, Emma saw them, 3 women in gowns that shimmered like gemstones, glittering and sharp. They stared at her as if she were a question no one had asked. Then one of them smiled, cruel and amused. She must be lost. The woman in the emerald dress leaned toward her friends, voice loud enough to carry. "That's the bride's old housekeeper, isn't it? Here to ask for a second chance." Laughter followed, sharp, rehearsed, like clinking glass meant to cut. The others joined in. One pulled out her phone, tilting it just enough for the camera to catch Emma's plain dress and dusty flats. "This is going viral," she whispered, grinning. Emma didn't flinch. She turned toward them slowly, her expression unreadable, eyes steady, not cold, but knowing. "You're welcome to ask me directly," she said, voice soft but unmistakably clear. "If you're that curious." The laughter paused just for a moment. Then the woman in gold smirked. "Oh, sweetie, I don't talk to the help." Emma stood still, hands relaxed at her sides, the lake breeze gently tugging at her braid. Around her, the clamor of more arriving guests grew louder. The show, it seemed, was just beginning. More guests began to gather, drawn not by curiosity, but by the scent of scandal. Suits tailored to perfection, gowns that shimmered with every step, eyes masked behind oversized sunglasses. And in the center of it all stood Emma, calm as still water, while the storm built around her. "She's bold," someone muttered, just loud enough. "Desperate," another replied. "Probably hoping to trap a lonely millionaire." A woman in ruby silk whispered to her husband, her voice laced with mockery. "Bet she printed that invitation herself." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Let's hope the caterers are this entertaining." Phones were already out, discreet but deliberate. Fingers tapped, cameras zoomed. Emma could feel their stares like pins against her skin, but she didn't move, didn't blink. Instead, she looked toward the lake again, its surface glimmering gold beneath the afternoon sun, as if it too was watching quietly, patiently, waiting for someone to see. The security guard returned this time with a woman beside him, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp like polished steel. She wore the confidence of someone who had said no more times than yes and rarely doubted herself. "Ma'am," she said briskly, barely glancing at Emma, "this entrance is for confirmed VIPs only." Emma held out her invitation again, steady. "It's real," she said simply. The woman snatched it, scanning the name, the seal, the barcode. Her brow twitched just slightly. Then, without a word, she turned and spoke into her earpiece. Behind them, whispers thickened. "I told you it was fake. God, the audacity." She should be embarrassed. Emma stood alone, sunlight resting on her shoulders like a shawl. She looked neither proud nor ashamed, just present. Still, from the terrace above, a guest raised her glass and smirked. Gold digger alert. Laughter followed. But Emma, she didn't even glance their way. Instead, she adjusted the strap of her dress and looked ahead like she'd walked through worse and kept walking anyway. The clipboard woman Sophia returned, now flanked by the guard. Her eyes didn't soften. "Your name checks out," she said. Voice clipped. "But you don't look like you belong here. Step aside." Emma didn't move. She met Sophia's stare with the quiet steadiness of someone who'd been underestimated her entire life. Before she could speak, Sophia stepped closer, voice rising. "You really thought you could fool us? Fake invites don't work here. Where'd you printed some online template?" The murmur of the crowd swelled like a rising tide. "Busted. She's conning her way in. Someone call security. Oh, wait, it's already here." Then without warning, Sophia tore the invitation in half. The sound, a single rip, was louder than the chatter. She tossed the pieces to the ground like something dirty. Emma didn't bend to pick them up. She just looked down at the torn paper for a heartbeat. Then straightened her back, her silence louder than their mockery. Phones tilted toward her like hungry eyes. Flash. Record. Zoom. "She's trying to trap a rich man before dessert," someone laughed. "Crashing in that thing," another said, gesturing at her linen dress. Tragic. Emma's dress now bore the faint crease of tension across her waist and a smear of dust on the hem. Still she stood tall, not defiant, not angry. Just unwavering. One guest, a young tech entrepreneur with a drink in hand, raised his voice. "Send her to the docks. She's ruining the aesthetic." More laughter. Cruel. Unchecked. A woman in pearls fanned herself lazily. "She doesn't belong in this picture, not with those shoes." Then, from the crowd, a crumpled napkin sailed through the air, landing at Emma's feet. Someone else flung a cocktail olive, the slick green sphere hitting her shoulder before falling to the stone. She didn't flinch. She simply brushed her braid back over one shoulder and looked not at them, but past them, toward something they couldn't see. The terrace became a theater, and Emma the unwilling lead framed by rose-covered archways and judgment. Every phone was pointed, every whisper sharpened. "She thinks this is a costume party," someone jeered. Another guest chuckled, eyes fixed on his screen. 20,000 views and climbing. She's trending for all the wrong reasons." Emma's fingers curled gently around her pendant, her mother's now warm from her skin. She exhaled, slowly, quietly, like releasing something she refused to carry anymore. A live stream voice pierced the air. "This is Emma Nobody. Thought she could scam her way into Beckham Rowe's wedding. Loser vibes." Comment bubbles flooded the screen. "Embarrassing. Clout chaser. She's done." Still, Emma didn't speak, didn't run. Her silence was not defeat, it was choice. She bent down once gracefully to pick up the torn pieces of her invitation, smoothed them carefully, folded them in half, and held them close like something sacred. They started moving her, one guard on each arm, firm but not violent. The crowd followed, gleeful in their cruelty, like spectators at an ancient punishment. Back to economy class. Someone shouted. A few clapped. A man tossed another olive. It missed, but the laughter didn't. Emma walked, posture unbroken, each step deliberate. Her braid swayed gently, catching the last glimmers of sunlight. The torn invitation remained in her hand, pressed to her chest like a heartbeat. "She's ruining the vibe," someone said behind a fan. "Just look at her. No shame." A woman in diamonds raised her phone for a final shot. Caption this: when your sugar daddy forgets to pick you up. They laughed again, but something in Emma's stillness made a few lower their cameras not out of guilt but unease. She wasn't begging, she wasn't crying. She walked through their judgment like it was weather something to be endured, not feared. The villa gates loomed ahead, black iron ornate final. Beyond them, the world watched through digital windows, thousands witnessing her humiliation in real time. A woman in a gold dress narrated gleefully into her phone. This is the moment she gets tossed for good. Say bye, Emma. The camera zoomed in on the olive stain on Emma's shoulder, on the dust clinging to her hem, on the silence she carried like a cloak. Inside, she could hear the music shift, violins, swelling guests, clinking glasses, as if a celebration was unfolding without her. But her eyes didn't stray toward the sound. They focused on the light just past the gate. The lake shimmered with that same golden hush, calm and infinite. And then a sound that didn't belong. A voice. Low, deep, quiet, like thunder held in check. "Take your hands off my wife." It cut through everything. The guards froze. The laughter died. Phones stilled mid-air. Emma closed her eyes for the briefest moment and smiled. The crowd turned as one neck-craning voices caught mid-breath. At the top of the terrace steps stood Beckham Rowe. Tailored black suit, open collar, no tie, effortless and exact. His hazel eyes scanned the crowd not with anger but with clarity, as if he'd seen all this coming. He moved down the steps slowly. Each footstep firm against the hush, ignoring the flurry of phones pointed his way. Emma didn't move. She stood beneath the archway, olive-stained and sunlit, calm as ever, like the world had only just caught up to her truth. Beckham reached her, his hand finding hers without hesitation. His thumb brushed her knuckles, small, instinctive, tender. "You okay?" he asked, voice low, meant only for her. She looked at him, green eyes steady. Always Beck. And then he turned. To them. To all of them. The crowd that had laughed, pointed, streamed, and sneered. And when he spoke, it was not loud, but it silenced everything. "This is Emma Carter." Beckham said, his voice carrying with a quiet authority that didn't need volume to command attention. "My wife." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, not dramatic, but stunned. Glasses trembled. Phones dropped a fraction lower. The weight of his words settled like fog across the terrace. "We were married 6 months ago," he continued, gaze sweeping over the frozen faces. No headlines, no photographers, just a courthouse, 2 witnesses, and a promise. Emma stood beside him, still holding the torn invitation in one hand, the other clasped gently in his. "She came here today, exactly as she is," Beckham said, not to deceive anyone, but to see who would look beyond the surface, to see who would treat a stranger with decency. A hush, thick, unbreathable. "And most of you," he added, voice tightening ever so slightly, failed her. Someone shifted. A bracelet clinked. The sound was painfully loud. Emma didn't look at them. She didn't have to. Beckham's voice had already stripped them bare. Beckham's eyes moved slowly across the crowd, not with rage, but with deep, unspoken disappointment. "You mocked her dress," he said quietly. "You judged her shoes, her silence, her worth." Vanessa Holt swallowed hard, her champagne flute trembling in her hand. Elena lowered her phone, the live stream still running but forgotten. Priya shifted her weight, avoiding Emma's gaze. Beckham took a breath, his voice softening, but only on the surface. "Emma walked away from a tenured position at Yale. Yes, Yale, to stand by me when I had nothing. No name, no investors, just a prototype and a rented apartment." He looked down at Emma for a moment. She smiled faintly, eyes bright but untearful. "She believed in me," he said, "when the world didn't even know I existed." Silence. Absolute. Not one phone dared click. Not one whisper dared rise. Because in that moment they all realized the woman they had tried to erase had already written herself into a better story. Emma didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence stood taller than any defense, wrapped in grace, not pride. She simply held Beckham's hand, the torn invitation now folded neatly in her other palm like a finished chapter. Beckham turned back to the crowd, his tone shifting steel beneath velvet. "If anyone here is chasing gold," he said, "it's not the woman who came without diamonds." His gaze landed on Vanessa. "It's the ones who trample others for a better view. On Elena, who profit off shame dressed as content. On Priya, who mock kindness because it threatens their mask." Each name dropped like a stone into still water, no anger, just truth. Guests looked down, adjusted bracelets, fidgeted with napkins. No one dared meet Emma's eyes. And yet Emma looked at them all, not with vengeance but with something far more disarming, pity and peace. Beckham's voice was quiet now, but final. "This ends now." He nodded once, and from the edge of the terrace a woman stepped forward, sharp suit hair, pulled back tablet in hand. Leah Chen, Beckham's chief of staff. She was already tapping. Calm, efficient, ruthless in silence. Leah Beckham said evenly, "Cross-check the guest list with security footage. Identify every person who insulted or humiliated my wife." Leah didn't blink. On it. The crowd stiffened unease, rippling like wind through silk. Glasses clinked nervously. One man cleared his throat as if that might erase what had just been said. "Those names," Beckham continued, "are no longer welcome here, or at any event we host, ever." A pause. "Anyone who still believes this was acceptable," he added, voice cold, "as lake water is free to leave now." No one moved. And then the guards began to walk not toward Emma but into the crowd. Whispers turned to dread. Phones slipped into clutches. Smirks vanished. Because they weren't the audience anymore. They were the ones being watched. The first to fall was Vanessa. A guard approached discreet but direct. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with me." She blinked, confused. "Excuse me, you've been removed from the guest list," Leah said without looking up from her tablet. "Effective immediately." Vanessa's confidence cracked. She clutched her gold clutch tighter, glancing around for support. None came. "This is a mistake," she stammered. "I'm a personal friend of—" But the guard was already guiding her toward the exit. The terrace parted around her like water fleeing a sinking ship. Her gown snagged on the gate's ironwork. The gold fabric tore slicing clean up the thigh. A gasp rippled through the crowd. One of her heels snapped on the stone path. She stumbled, caught herself barely before the paparazzi waiting beyond the gates caught the moment in full flash-burst fury. Someone whispered, "She set Emma up. They'll cancel her in hours." They were wrong. It wouldn't take that long. Vanessa Holt was already done. Outside the gates, cameras exploded like fireworks. Flashes captured Vanessa's fall, the rip in her gown, the fury on her face the moment her broken heel crunched against gravel. Paparazzi shouted her name not with admiration, but with hunger. One headline uploaded before she even reached the car, "Ouch! Holt, humiliated from high society to canceled in heels." Back on the terrace, Leah's voice rang out calm and lethal. Vanessa Holt, removed for defaming Emma Carter Rowe. The name landed like a gavel. Next came Elena. A guard stepped beside her handout. "Your phone, ma'am." "No, wait," she said, backing up. "I was just filming what I saw." "It's content, not cruelty." Leah didn't look up. Accounts frozen. Sponsors notified. Platform terms violated. Elena's hand trembled as her phone was taken. Her carefully curated life, her empire of filters and captions evaporated with one swipe. She walked toward the gates, eyes hollow. The screen of her once famous phone cracked against stone. Behind her, someone whispered. She streamed Emma's pain for followers and lost everything real. Elena passed through the iron gates like a shadow fading at sunset. Outside, her name still trended, but now as a warning, not a brand. Inside, silence lingered like smoke. Priya tried to disappear into the crowd, adjusting her gown. Eyes darting for a safe corner, but the guards saw her before she moved an inch. "No, please." she said, voice suddenly small. "I didn't mean—" "You laughed." Leia replied, her tone flat. "You filmed. You posted." A single gesture and the guard stepped in. Her heels clicked frantically on the stone, fast at first, then slower like defeat sinking in. As she passed Emma, she averted her gaze, lips pressed tight. Emma didn't move, but her eyes followed gently, not triumphant, not cruel. Just human. When the gates closed behind Priya, the crowd finally exhaled. No one else was live streaming, no one else was laughing, and yet Emma hadn't said a single harsh word. She didn't have to. Grace had already spoken for her. Whispers rippled like wind through tall grass, hushed, unsure, ashamed. The clinking of glasses had stopped. The string quartet somewhere inside the villa fell silent mid-melody. Even the birds seemed to still. Emma stood at the center, calm and unshaken, olive stain still on her dress dust on her shoes. But now, the way they looked at her had changed. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. Sir Reginald the British Baron, who'd mocked her earlier, tried to summon his usual arrogance. "I'm a knight," he muttered stiffly to the guard approaching. "This is an outrage." "You were recorded, sir," the guard replied. "This way, please." His cane tapped once then again, not with command, but surrender. Irina, his companion, tried to cling to his arm, but the guard simply stepped between them. They were escorted out, titles, jewels, and all without ceremony. Behind them, someone whispered. She thought a name would protect her. Another replied, but Emma didn't need one, she just needed the truth. The villa's gates closed with a final echoing clang. Inside, the air felt different, thinner, quieter, like the weight of cruelty had finally lifted. Beckham remained still, hand still holding Emma's thumb, gently brushing hers in silent reassurance. His voice, when it returned, was softer than before, but it cut deeper. "This wasn't just about Emma," he said, eyes moving slowly over the remaining guests. "It was a test, one you didn't know you were taking. No one dared speak." He glanced at Leia, who gave a slight nod. The list had been cleared. Only those who had stood silent or uncertain remained. Beckham continued. "Not one of you questioned the guards. Not one stepped forward. You saw a woman alone and chose cruelty over curiosity, mockery over kindness." Emma didn't flinch. She looked at them. The eyes that had judged her, streamed her, dismissed her, and offered nothing but stillness. It was not forgiveness. It was something harder to earn. Dignity. Ethan Caldwell, still clutching his champagne, tried to laugh, forced brittle. "Bit dramatic, mate," he mumbled. "It's just a misunderstanding." "Yeah." Beckham's eyes locked onto his, and the smile died on Ethan's lips. "Would you say the same?" Beckham asked quietly. "If it had been your mother? Your sister? Someone you loved?" Ethan looked away, suddenly fascinated by the bubbles in his glass. Emma squeezed Beckham's hand gently, a signal. Enough. Not out of mercy, but clarity. She wasn't here for vengeance. She'd already won something greater. Beckham nodded, slightly inhaled and exhaled slow. From this moment on, he said, his voice returning to calm command. "The Rowe family will stand for something more than wealth and power. We will stand for character, for worth not worn, but lived." The crowd listened because now they understood the cost of not listening. And Emma, olive-stained, dusty-shoed, radiant, stood as proof, not of status, but of standard. Leia stepped forward once more, voice clear, firm, and final. "All removals have been executed. Security footage archived. Press inquiries will be managed. Live streams reported and taken down." Then she looked to Emma not as an assistant, but as someone who now saw her. "Truly, it's done," she said softly. Emma offered a small nod, the kind that carried more than words ever could. Gratitude, closure, peace. Around them, the remaining guests stood quieter, more still, not out of fear, but out of reflection. They watched her now, not as a spectacle, but as something they couldn't name: strength without armor, grace without permission. Beckham turned to Emma, eyes softening. You didn't have to go through this, he murmured. She smiled up at him, one corner of her mouth lifting gently. I wanted to, she said. For us. Then she let go of his hand just for a moment and walked calmly back into the villa, not to hide, but to change everything. When Emma returned, the terrace seemed to hold its breath. Gone was the linen dress, the olive stain, the dust. In its place, a gown of ivory silk that flowed like water over stone, its bodice embroidered with delicate pearls that shimmered softly in the waning light. Her hair, once braided and wind-blown, now cascaded in loose waves tucked behind one ear with a simple diamond clip. Quiet, elegant, unmistakably her. She didn't walk like someone stepping into a spotlight. She walked like someone returning home. Gasps rippled not because she was suddenly beautiful, but because now they saw what had always been there. She paused beneath the same arch where she'd been judged, framed by roses and golden light. Her eyes scanned the crowd, calm, searching not for approval, but for understanding. And slowly, something unexpected happened. One by one, guests lowered their phones. Not from shame, from reverence. Because in that moment they realized she had never needed the dress to be a bride. She had always been the light. Beckham stepped toward her, and for a moment the noise of the world vanished. No music, no murmurs, just the soft brush of silk as he reached for her hand. Their fingers intertwined effortlessly like they had done in kitchens and airport terminals in quiet mornings and late-night failures. There was nothing performative in the gesture. Only truth. The officiant, an older Italian man in white robes, Father Lorenzo approached with a warm, knowing smile. He didn't ask if they were ready. He didn't need to. The lake behind them turned molten gold, the sky streaked with lavender and peach, and then the ceremony began. No stage, no spectacle, just words. Gentle, real. Emma's voice was clear as she spoke her vows. I don't promise perfection. I promise presence. Through storm and stillness, I will be yours. Beckham's voice followed softer, rougher. You're not my other half, Emma. You're my whole beginning. And for once the crowd listened not as guests, but as witnesses. The vows settled into the evening air like soft feathers, nothing grand, but everything true. Emma smiled as Beckham tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his hand lingering for just a second longer than necessary. Not for show, not for the cameras, just for her. Father Lorenzo lifted his hands, his voice a calm whisper. By the power given to me, I now bless what your hearts have already chosen. There was no applause yet, just silence, the kind that stretches between people when something sacred has been spoken. Then came the kiss. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rehearsed. It was slow, gentle, a sealing of something unbreakable, not because of what they'd overcome, but because of what they'd chosen to remain. The crowd watched, still hushed. Some wiped tears without fully understanding why. It wasn't the beauty of the moment that moved them. It was the quiet resilience that had led to it. Because this wedding, this love, wasn't built on spectacle. It was built on survival, on stillness, on soul. As the kiss faded and their foreheads met for a breath, the first soft notes of music returned, a cello, low and warm, drifting across the terrace like a blessing. Beckham and Emma turned to face the guests together. This time, there were no cameras raised, no smirks, no whispered jabs. Only stillness. And something deeper reverence. The applause came slowly. A few hands at first, then more. It wasn't thunderous, it wasn't wild, it was honest. Emma didn't bask in it. She simply let it pass over her like wind through trees and then took Beckham's arm with a quiet nod. Together they stepped down from the archway, not toward a stage, but into a gathering that had been transformed. Not by wealth, not by shame, but by witnessing the strength of something rare, dignity without pride, love without performance. Behind them, Father Lorenzo watched with a soft smile. Some weddings are beautiful, he whispered to himself, but this one will be remembered. Night settled gently over the villa as if even the sky understood it was time to soften. Lanterns flickered to life among the gardens, casting golden pools of light across the stone paths. The reception unfolded beneath a canopy of stars, no flashing bulbs, no paparazzi drones, just music, the scent of jasmine, and the hum of a quieter kind of joy. Emma and Beckham moved through the space together, not as hosts, but as equals among those still learning how to look differently. They stopped only when a child approached no more than 7, leading a frail gray cat in her arms. "She likes you," the girl said shyly, holding the cat out. Emma knelt down slowly, her gown pooling around her like water. She stroked the cat's fur, thin but soft, and smiled. "Thank you for sharing her," she whispered. The girl beamed. From a distance, Leia watched Tablet finally dark, her shoulders relaxed. She turned to Beckham. "She's trending," Leia said quietly, "not as the scandal." Beckham raised an eyebrow. "As what then?" Leia smiled. "The billionaire's truth." Beckham chuckled softly, glancing toward Emma, now seated on a stone bench beneath a canopy of climbing roses, the little girl still beside her, the cat curled peacefully in her lap. "She always was," he murmured. "They just couldn't see it." Leia nodded, her voice gentler than usual. "They see it now." Nearby, servers moved quietly with trays of warm bread and fresh fruit, the clatter of excess replaced by the comfort of simplicity. A few guests approached Emma cautiously, respectfully. One offered a quiet apology. Another simply said, "Thank you." Emma didn't react with bitterness or distance. She listened. She smiled when it was real, and when it wasn't, she simply looked past them, not to be cruel, but because she no longer needed their permission to be whole. As the music shifted to a soft waltz, Beckham extended his hand to her once more. "Dance with me," he asked. She looked up at him, eyes warm, steady. "Always," she said. And as they stepped onto the terrace floor, it wasn't royalty that watched them. It was something rarer. Respect. The first few steps were quiet, just the soft rustle of silk and the whisper of shoes on stone. Emma and Beckham moved as if they were the only ones there, their rhythm not learned but remembered like something born from late-night kitchens and silent apartment floors. The guests stood still, drinks forgotten in hand, eyes drawn not by spectacle, but by serenity. No spotlight followed them, only the glow of hanging lanterns and the hush of something sacred unfolding. Emma rested her head briefly against Beckham's shoulder. He didn't say a word, just tightened his hold, his thumb tracing a slow circle at the small of her back. A breeze lifted the edge of her gown. Somewhere a bell from the village below chimed the hour. Time passed, but they stayed. Not as a billionaire and his bride, not as a viral story or a symbol, just as two people who had been through the fire and chose to keep dancing anyway. And from the edges of the garden, someone whispered, "That's not just love, it's something stronger." As the song faded, Beckham pressed a soft kiss to Emma's temple, and they parted just enough to smile at each other, not the wide smiles of celebration, but the kind that came from deep knowing, the kind shared between two people who had nothing once, and chose each other anyway. They returned to their table beneath an old olive tree, its twisted limbs reaching like time itself. Emma sat quietly, fingers tracing the rim of her water glass, not anxious, not searching, simply present. An older woman approached, silver hair, pinned eyes, tired but kind. She didn't introduce herself. She just placed a small envelope on the table, hand slightly trembling. "I stood there," she said softly, "and I did nothing. I'm sorry." Emma looked up, eyes gentle. "Doing something now," she replied, "is what matters." The woman nodded, eyes glistening, and walked away. Beckham turned to Emma, voice hushed. "You're changing them." Emma shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I'm just reminding them who they are." And in that, she revealed who she had always been. Later that evening, Emma wandered briefly from the reception, drawn by the quiet pull of the lake. The moon hung low silver and still casting a ribbon of light across the water. She walked barefoot now, her heels left behind like a burden no longer worth carrying. Each step on the dewy grass was soft, grounding, real. She paused near the edge where a small stone bench overlooked the shoreline. There, folded gently on the seat, was a note. her name written in a hand she hadn't seen in years. She opened it slowly. A few lines. Familiar. Ink slightly faded. "I won't be there to walk you down the aisle. M, but I see you, and I know. You chose right. Dad." Her breath caught, not in sorrow, but in warmth. That ache behind the ribs, beautiful and unbearable all at once. She held the letter to her chest, eyes closing. Then she looked out over the lake, whispering softly, "I miss you." And in the hush that followed, the water answered not with words, but with stillness, as if he heard. Emma stayed there for a while, the letter resting in her lap, her fingers gently smoothing the creases not to erase them, but to feel them. Every fold a trace of time, a memory left behind by hands she once held. The sounds of the reception drifted faintly from the villa laughter, clinking glasses, the soft hum of a piano. But here, by the lake, the world moved slower, more honestly. She breathed in deeply the scent of earth after dusk roses just beginning to close and lake air heavy with silence. And then, from the path behind her, footsteps. Slow, familiar. Beckham sat beside her without a word. His jacket, now off, sleeves rolled up, stripped of formality, returned to the man she met before the world knew his name. He saw the letter, didn't ask, just placed a hand gently over hers, anchoring her without needing to speak. She looked at him, and for a long, beautiful moment they didn't need language, because some silences are the most honest kind of conversation. They sat in that silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled, only shared. Emma leaned her head lightly on Beckham's shoulder, her hand still resting atop the letter. The cool night brushed against their skin, but neither moved. The world for once felt like it could pause just long enough for this moment to last. "You okay?" he asked finally, voice low. She nodded against him. "More than okay," she whispered. "I'm exactly where I meant to be." Beckham exhaled slowly, like the last weight he carried had finally lifted. He turned, slightly brushing his lips against her hair. "I wish your dad could have seen you tonight," he said. Emma smiled, eyes closed. He did. They sat a little longer, listening to the lake lap against the stones, the wind rustle through olive leaves, the heartbeat of a day that had tried to break her but ended up revealing her. "I didn't expect this," Beckham murmured. Emma looked up, eyes soft. No one ever expects the quietest person in the room to be the strongest. And tonight, the quiet had won. Back at the villa, the reception had softened into something slower, warmer. No longer a spectacle, but a gathering. Guests spoke in gentler tones now, no longer competing for attention, but seeking connection. Under the lantern glow, Emma and Beckham returned hands intertwined, no fanfare needed. Conversations quieted as they passed not out of fear, but respect. The kind that's earned, not demanded. At the dessert table, a young server approached Emma, nervous but smiling. "Ma'am," he said, voice hushed. I watched what happened earlier. I just wanted to say, thank you, for standing there, for not folding." Emma's face softened. "You don't always have to shout to stand," she said. "Sometimes it's stronger when you don't." He nodded, eyes wide, then hurried off, holding his tray a little higher. Nearby, two women who had once laughed at Emma now sat in silence watching her. One reached for her phone, opened her photo app, then paused and deleted the image. Emma saw it, said nothing, just offered a small nod across the room. The kind of grace that didn't need to be noticed to change something. The night deepened, stars blooming across the sky like silent applause. The lake reflected each one a mirror to the heavens, still vast, eternal. Emma stepped away from the music for a moment, standing near a column draped in jasmine. She reached up, fingers brushing the petals, then closed her eyes. Inhale. Exhale. A soft meow pulled her attention downward. The gray cat from earlier had returned, circling her ankle tail, curling with affection. Emma crouched, lifting it gently into her arms. The cat purred instantly, nuzzling beneath her chin as if it had known her forever. She smiled, eyes misting just slightly. From behind, Beckham watched the scene unfold, his wife in silk and stars, cradling a stray with more tenderness than most people gave to each other. It was such a simple image, and yet he knew this was the moment that would stay with him. Not the ceremony, not the speeches, but the woman who found joy in quiet things, and gave the world a softer way to be strong. Later, as the final song played low beneath the canopy of trees, Emma stood with a cup of tea cradled between her hands, not champagne, not celebration, just warmth. She looked out over the terrace where guests now lingered in small circles. They weren't bragging or posing anymore. They were talking, listening, sharing photos of grandkids passing plates, asking real questions. Beckham joined her holding 2 small shortbread cookies. "One for you," he said, handing her the flower-shaped one, "and one for the girl who changed the weather." Emma smiled, taking the cookie, letting her head lean lightly against his shoulder. "I didn't change the weather," she said softly. "I just stood still long enough for the storm to pass." Beckham laughed under his breath. "You didn't flinch, Emma. Not once." She sipped her tea. "I've been flinched at before," she said, "but life taught me not everything deserves a reaction." And across the garden a guest caught her eye, smiled, and simply placed a hand on their heart. Emma returned the gesture without a word. Connection. Without noise. The evening began to wind down, but no one rushed to leave. There were no grand exits, no final toasts shouted over laughter, just soft goodbyes, warm embraces, and a quiet that felt earned. Emma walked once more through the garden, trailing her fingers along the tops of the lavender bushes, brushing past candlelit tables, now half-cleared napkins folded neatly beside empty plates. She stopped at a small table near the edge of the terrace, the one with the empty chair she'd seen when she arrived, the one she'd noticed but hadn't approached. Until now. She sat for a moment, hands in her lap, looking out across the moonlit lake. Then carefully, she reached into the pocket hidden in her gown's folds and pulled out a folded photo, old soft around the edges. Her and her mother laughing on a porch step, faces sunlit and carefree. She placed it gently on the table just beside the untouched teacup. "I saved you a seat," Emma whispered. And for a moment in that quiet space, it felt like someone was truly there. Emma sat still, the photo fluttering slightly in the breeze as if her mother's laughter echoed faintly through the garden one last time. She didn't cry. Not quite, but her eyes shimmered soft and unhidden like light reflecting on water that had finally settled. From the villa, the final notes of music faded into the hush of the evening. Dishes were cleared quietly. Voices lowered to murmurs. The celebration had become something gentler. Remembrance, reflection, return. Beckham approached once more this time with no words. He didn't ask what she was thinking. He didn't try to fill the silence. He simply offered his hand. Emma rose slowly, pressing the photo gently to her heart before slipping it back into her pocket. She looked up at Beckham, a small smile forming not out of happiness but out of peace. Together they walked back toward the house, arm in arm. No spotlight, no applause. Just footsteps in sync heading toward a life they had already been building long before anyone else had noticed. And as they disappeared beneath the jasmine-covered arch, the breeze carried a single whisper. She didn't change to fit the world. She changed the world by staying exactly who she was. The villa slept under a blanket of starlight. Inside, candles flickered low, casting soft shadows across stone walls and empty chairs. The celebration was over, but its meaning lingered. Emma stood by the window of their suite, looking out over Lake Como, her reflection merging with the moonlight on glass. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Behind her, Beckham wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood like that, quiet, close home. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Emma smiled, her voice barely above a breath. That I didn't need to prove anything. And she was right, because she hadn't fought them with rage or corrected them with pride. She had simply stood there, calm, composed, undeniable, and let her truth be louder than their noise. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about revelation. Emma Carter Rowe didn't walk into a billionaire's wedding to be seen. She walked in to remind the world you don't need diamonds to shine. And if this story spoke to you, leave a not for the dress, not for the drama, but for the strength in staying true to who you are,